Have you ever felt that twinge of guilt when saying no to someone you love? That moment when you know what's right for you, but worry about disappointing others? As we mature in years, this struggle often intensifies. The people who care about us mean well. They offer advice, make suggestions, and sometimes even decisions on our behalf. But where does their concern end and your autonomy begin? Today, we're addressing one of the most challenging aspects of growing older with dignity, establishing healthy boundaries with the people closest to us. By the end of this video, you'll learn 9 powerful ways to reclaim your independence without damaging your relationships. You'll discover how to say no with love and understanding, transforming what might feel like rejection into an opportunity for more authentic connection. Whether it's adult children concerned about your health, friends with opinions about how you should spend your retirement, or family members making assumptions about your capabilities, learning to gracefully decline is not just a skill, it's an essential form of self-care. To make this clearer, listen to this story. Before we continue, remember to like the video to help us continue creating content for you. In a mid-sized suburban town, the Pinewood Community Center hosts a weekly gathering that has become something of a sanctuary for its members. What began as a simple book club has evolved into a space where wisdom flows freely and important life lessons are exchanged. The sunlit East Room fills with laughter and thoughtful conversation every Thursday afternoon as 5 particular members take their seats. Nancy Wilson, a 67-year-old retired teacher with a silver bob that catches the afternoon light, serves as the unofficial leader of the group. Her organizational skills and gentle persistence have kept the circle thriving for over a year. Today, she stands before her friends with something special prepared, a large poster board propped on an easel beside her. Robert Anderson, 72, settles into his usual chair, the kind lines around his eyes deepening as he smiles in anticipation. A widower and former business owner, Robert brings both vulnerability and strength to the group, having navigated the profound transition of losing his life partner 2 years ago. Beside him sits Susan Martinez, whose energetic presence belies her 63 years. Recently retired from nursing, Susan approaches life with the same compassionate directness she brought to her patients, often cutting through pretense with refreshing honesty. David Cooper, 70, tall and thoughtful with a perpetual hint of sawdust. On his clothes from his woodworking hobby, takes his seat. The former engineer brings a methodical approach to life's challenges, breaking down complex emotional situations into manageable parts. Completing the semicircle is Linda Parker, an elegant 66-year-old with a salt and pepper pixie cut who still works part-time as a financial advisor. Her precision with numbers is matched only by her precision with words. She rarely speaks without purpose. I've been thinking about all our conversations, Nancy begins, adjusting her reading glasses and surveying the faces of friends who have become a chosen family of sorts. About how difficult it can be to say no to people we love. So I've created something I think might help us all. The group leans forward in their chairs, drawn by the gentle authority in Nancy's voice and the promise of wisdom that might ease a shared struggle. I'm calling it 9 things to reject after 55, even from people you love, she continues, her hand resting on the covered poster. Because sometimes the kindest thing we can do for ourselves is to set a boundary. A contemplative silence falls over the room as each person reflects on their own experiences with boundaries, the ones they've struggled to establish, the ones they wish they'd set sooner, and the ones they still need to create. Nancy steps forward, her confidence evident. In her posture, she removes the cover from the poster, revealing a neatly written list. The group's eyes scan the words, nodding in recognition of shared struggles. Let's start with number 1, Nancy says, tapping the first item on her list. Reject unsolicited. Health advice, She moves to sit on the edge of her chair, leaning toward her friends as if sharing a confidence. My daughter means well, she truly does. But every Sunday dinner comes with a side of health articles she's printed out, supplements she's researched, and diets she thinks I should try. Robert chuckles, his deep laugh resonating in the sunlit room. My son does the same. Last week he brought me a fitness tracker and had it set up before I could even protest. Exactly, Nancy continues. The problem isn't that they care. It's that they assume we aren't already managing our health in ways that work for us. After 30 years of teaching, I know how to research. I've developed a relationship with my doctor that's based on mutual respect. We have a plan that takes into account my whole life, not just my blood pressure readings. David nods, his tall frame straightening. So how did you handle it, Nancy? With your daughter? I had to be both firm and kind, Nancy replies, pushing her silver bob behind her ear. I said, thank you for caring about my health. I appreciate that you want the best for me, but I trust my healthcare team, and constantly receiving advice makes me feel like you don't believe I'm capable of taking care of myself. It wasn't easy. I saw the hurt flash across her face. But then something wonderful happened. The group leans forward, invested in the outcome. She asked questions instead of giving advice. She wanted to understand my health plan rather than replace it. It became a conversation instead of a lecture. Linda, always practical, interjects. That's the key, isn't it? Getting them to see us as competent adults who might just have decades of experience managing our own well-being. Nancy nods. Absolutely. And it applies to all of us, whether we're dealing with well-meaning children, friends, or even spouses. Rejecting unsolicited health advice doesn't mean rejecting concern. It means establishing that your health decisions remain yours to make. She glances around the circle. Think about areas where you might need to reclaim this authority. Is someone constantly commenting on what you eat, suggesting medical tests, questioning your medication? These moments are opportunities to gently educate others about how they can support without supervising. Susan raises her hand. I found it helpful to involve my children in one doctor's appointment. They heard firsthand that I'm on top of things, and it helped them step back. Excellent strategy, Nancy agrees. Another approach is to designate specific times to discuss health concerns. This prevents every interaction from becoming a health check. You might say, I'd prefer to save health discussions for our monthly lunch so our family gatherings can focus on enjoying each other's company. The room fills with murmurs of agreement as Nancy returns to her seat. Remember, she concludes, rejecting unsolicited health advice is an act of self-respect. You've managed your health this long. Trust yourself to continue doing so. Robert rises next, adjusting his glasses as he approaches the poster. His kind eyes crinkle at the corners as he points to the second item on the list. Reject technological supervision, he reads, his voice carrying a hint of amusement. This one hit home for me, he admits, sliding his hands into his pockets. After Elaine passed, my kids became understandably concerned about me living alone, but their concern quickly morphed into something that felt a lot like surveillance. He paces slowly before the group, his movements deliberate. It started innocently enough. My son installed a tracking app on my phone in case of emergency. My daughter set up cameras at my front and back doors for security. My grandson configured my smart speaker to allow them to drop in any time without calling first to check. On me, Robert pauses, his expression thoughtful. Each addition seemed reasonable in isolation. Who could argue against safety? But together, they created an invisible cage. I began to feel watched, monitored, like a toddler who couldn't be trusted to navigate the world. Susan nods emphatically. My sister did the same when I decided to take that solo trip to the Grand Canyon last year. Suddenly my phone was pinging. Her every time I moved locations. Exactly, Robert continues. The irony wasn't lost on me. I drove across this country 4 times before GPS existed. I ran a business with 40 employees for 30 years. Yet suddenly I couldn't be trusted to remember my own doctor's appointments or drive to the grocery store without supervision. He stops pacing, his voice growing stronger. The tipping point came when I turned off my phone during a movie and emerged to 14 panicked text messages and 3 missed calls. My daughter had seen I was offline and assumed the worst. What did you do? David asks, leaning forward. I had to have a difficult conversation, Robert answers. I sat my children down and said, I appreciate your concern, but I need my privacy. I've earned the right to move through the world without constant monitoring. Technology should enhance my independence, not restrict it. He runs a hand through his silver hair. I compromised by keeping the emergency button function on my phone, but removed the tracking app. I explained that their constant monitoring was actually increasing my stress, not reducing it, Linda interjects with her characteristic directness. Did they push back? Of course, Robert chuckles. They listed every worst-case scenario they could imagine. I acknowledged their fears, but reminded them that a life without risk isn't a life fully lived. I asked them to trust my judgment, as I had trusted theirs. When they were finding their way as adults, Nancy smiles supportively. How did they respond to that perspective? It took time, Robert admits. Change doesn't happen overnight, but gradually they began to step back. Now, instead of tracking my movements, my daughter calls for a proper conversation. My son helped me find a medical alert system that contacts emergency services directly if I need help, without requiring constant family monitoring. He looks around the room earnestly. The key was helping them understand that their technological supervision, however well-intentioned, was undermining my dignity. Once they recognized that, we found better ways to address their concerns while preserving my autonomy. Robert returns to his seat, but remains engaged as he addresses the group. If you're feeling digitally smothered by loved ones, start by understanding their fears. They're usually coming from a place of love. Then assert your boundaries clearly. Technology should serve you, not surveil you. Consider which digital connections enhance your life and which make you feel diminished, then act accordingly. As Robert settles back into his chair, Susan rises with characteristic energy. Her practical nursing background is evident in her direct approach as she points to the 3rd item on Nancy's poster. Reject pressure to downsize before you're ready, she reads, her voice carrying both warmth and determination. This one speaks to me personally, Susan begins, her hands moving expressively as she speaks. After my retirement last year, it seemed like everyone had an opinion about my 3-bedroom home. It's too much for you to maintain, they said. You should sell while the market is good, they insisted. Wouldn't a nice little condo be easier? They asked, not really expecting an answer. David nods in recognition. My brother-in-law sends me real estate listings for retirement communities every month. Never asked for them, but they keep coming. That's exactly it, Susan continues, her energy building. There's this assumption that after a certain age, we should all be reducing our footprint, as if our needs and desires naturally shrink along with our work responsibilities. She moves to the window, gesturing toward the community garden visible outside. My home isn't just square footage, it's the space where I live my life fully. My garden isn't a burden, it's my joy and my exercise. My craft room isn't unused space, it's where I create. My guest bedroom isn't wasted, it's where my grandchildren stay and where I host my sister during her visits. Nancy interjects thoughtfully, it sounds like they're reducing a complex emotional decision to simple practicalities. Precisely, Susan agrees, returning to face the group. They focus on maintenance and stairs and utility bills, all legitimate considerations certainly, but they completely overlook what that space provides me emotionally, creatively, and socially. Linda asks pragmatically, "How did you respond to this pressure?" Susan smiles, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "I had to be direct. I told my well-meaning family, I understand your concerns, but my home brings me joy and purpose. When the time comes that it truly feels like a burden rather than a blessing, I'll be the first to know, and I'll ask for your help then." She continues with growing confidence. "I also explained that forcing this decision prematurely could actually harm my health. Research shows that maintaining independence and purpose significantly impacts well-being as we age. My home allows me to garden, host gatherings, pursue hobbies, and contribute to my community, all vital to my physical and emotional health." Robert nods approvingly. "You made it about facts rather than feelings. Smart approach." "Well, both matter," Susan acknowledges. "I needed them to understand that premature downsizing can lead to isolation, decreased physical activity, and loss of identity for some people. It's not one size fits all, and the timing has to be right." She addresses the whole group with renewed passion. "Here's the thing, this isn't about stubbornly refusing change. It's about claiming the right to make this significant life decision on your own timeline, based on your unique circumstances. Some people thrive in smaller spaces and welcome the transition. Others need their established environment to flourish. Neither is wrong, they're just different responses to aging." David asks thoughtfully, "What about legitimate concerns, though, if there are safety issues or genuine financial strains?" "Valid question," Susan responds. "If loved ones raise concrete concerns, listen. Perhaps some modifications would address safety issues without requiring a move. If finances are the real problem, explore options like property tax relief programs for seniors or home sharing arrangements." She pauses, her expression softening. The goal isn't to dismiss all input. It's to ensure that any housing decision centers your needs and readiness, not others' convenience or assumptions. Sometimes the right response is, "Thank you for your concern. I'm keeping an open mind about the future, but right now, this home is where I thrive." If this topic interests you, comment 1 below. This helps me better understand what you like. Continuing. As Susan concludes and returns to her seat, David rises with his characteristic thoughtful demeanor. The former engineer approaches the poster with measured steps, his tall frame casting a long shadow in the afternoon light. He taps the 4th item on Nancy's list, reject being the default babysitter. "This one," David begins, his deep voice filling the room, "might be the most difficult to address because it involves people we truly love spending time with. Our grandchildren." He smiles warmly at the thought of them. "But even the most wonderful relationships need boundaries." Nancy nods in agreement. "I struggled with this one too. It's hard to say no to time with the little ones." "Exactly," David continues. "When my daughter Melissa had her twins 3 years ago, I was overjoyed. Those first months, I was at their house constantly, partly to help, partly because I couldn't get enough of those tiny faces." His expression grows more serious. But gradually, the requests became expectations. What started as, "Dad, could you possibly watch the twins on Friday?" became, "We're dropping the kids off at 4 on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. See you." And then, Robert interjects with understanding. "No discussion, just announcement." "Precisely," David agrees. "I found myself watching the calendar with anxiety, seeing my woodworking days disappear. Projects sat half-finished in my workshop. The woodworking class I'd been excited to teach at the community center. I had to decline because I couldn't commit to the schedule." He moves toward the window, gazing out momentarily before turning back to the group. "Don't misunderstand. I adore my grandchildren. That time with them is precious. But after waiting decades to pursue my passion for woodworking, I found myself putting it aside completely." Linda asks directly, "How did you approach this with your daughter?" That conversation couldn't have been easy. David smiles ruefully. It wasn't. I rehearsed it for days. Finally, I invited her for coffee, without the children, and explained that while I treasured being a grandfather, I needed a predictable schedule that allowed me to pursue my own interests as well. Susan leans forward. How did she take it? Initially, not well, David admits. There were tears, accusations that I didn't want to be involved in the children's lives. It was difficult, but I stood firm and suggested an alternative. I would reserve Tuesdays and every other Saturday specifically for grandpa time, days when I could fully engage with the twins without distraction or resentment. He continues, with growing confidence. I explained that this would actually improve the quality of our time together. Rather than a distracted grandfather checking his watch, the children would have my complete attention on our designated days. The rest of the week would be mine to allocate as I chose. Nancy smiles approvingly. You created a win-win situation. Eventually, yes, David nods. It took adjustment, but now everyone benefits. My daughter and son-in-law know exactly when. They can count on me. The twins look forward to our special days together. And I've reclaimed time for my workshop and other interests. He addresses the group earnestly. This is about recognizing that grandparenting is a relationship, not a job. It's about quality time freely given, not obligatory service. When we allow ourselves to become the default childcare option without boundaries, we risk burning out and ultimately bringing less joy to the relationship. Robert adds thoughtfully, it's teaching our children an important lesson too, that our lives continue to have purpose and meaning beyond family roles. Absolutely, David agrees. By valuing our time, we model healthy boundaries for the next generation. We show them that aging isn't about becoming exclusively available to others, but about continuing to balance relationships with personal fulfillment. He looks around the room, making eye contact with each person. If you're struggling with this boundary, start by examining your own feelings. Are you agreeing to babysit out of genuine desire or guilt and obligation? Are you regularly canceling your own plans to accommodate last-minute childcare requests? Do you feel resentful during the time you spend with your grandchildren? David's voice grows warmer. These are signs that a conversation about boundaries is needed. Remember, saying no to being the default babysitter isn't saying no to a relationship with your grandchildren. It's saying yes to a sustainable, joy-filled connection that doesn't come at the expense of your own well-being. As he returns to his seat, Linda rises with characteristic elegance. Her financial expertise is evident in her precise movements as she approaches the poster. With confidence born of years advising others, she points to the 5th item on Nancy's list: reject financial interference. This point, Linda begins, her voice clear and authoritative, touches on something deeply personal yet frequently invaded: our financial autonomy. She surveys the room with a direct gaze. How many of you have had family members offer to help manage your money, as if reaching a certain age suddenly diminished your financial competence? Several hands raise in the room, acknowledging this. Common experience. My experience, Linda continues, brushing a strand of salt and pepper hair from her face, came after my divorce 6 years ago. Despite decades of managing investments professionally, my son-in-law suddenly became very concerned about my financial well-being. Her tone remains measured, but her posture straightens with remembered indignation. At first, it was general questions about my retirement planning, reasonable enough, but this quickly escalated to suggestions that he take a look at my portfolio, offers to help organize my accounts, and eventually direct criticism of my investment choices. Nancy nods sympathetically, as if divorce somehow compromised your financial intelligence. Precisely, Linda agrees. The irony being that I've helped clients navigate post-divorce finances for 20 years. Yet suddenly, My son-in-law, who works in technology, not finance, believed he needed to intervene. In my affairs, David leans forward. How did you handle it without creating family tension? That's always the challenge. Linda's lips curve into a slight smile. First, I recognize the concern behind his offers. Financial security is emotional, and family members often genuinely worry about our stability as we age. Acknowledging that valid concern helped me respond without defensiveness. She moves closer to the group, her voice taking on a teacher's clarity. Then I was direct. During a family dinner, when he once again offered to look over my investments, I said clearly, I appreciate your concern, but I've been managing my own money successfully for 40 years, including through a divorce and recession. My finances are not open for discussion unless I initiate the conversation. Robert whistles softly. That's wonderfully straightforward. It needed to be, Linda replies. Ambiguity around financial boundaries invites continued interference. I followed up by explaining that my finances are private, not because they're problematic, but because they're personal. She pauses, glancing around the circle. The key was offering reassurance without justification. I told my family that I consult with professional advisors regularly and have thorough plans in place, but I didn't detail those plans or defend my choices. That would have implied they had a right to evaluate my decisions. Susan interjects with curiosity. Did it work immediately? Linda shakes her head. No, boundaries rarely do. My son-in-law was taken aback. There were a few awkward family gatherings, but gradually everyone adjusted to this new parameter. Now, 3 years later, my financial life remains private, and our relationship has actually improved without that unnecessary tension. She addresses the group with increasing conviction. This boundary is particularly important for women of our generation. Many of us grew up when financial decisions were considered men's business. Some of us deferred to husbands or fathers. But those days are gone, and we've earned the right to financial autonomy. Nancy adds thoughtfully, it's about respect, isn't it? Respecting the lifetime of experience and judgment we've developed. Exactly, Linda agrees. If you're facing financial interference from well-meaning family members, remember these strategies. First, acknowledge their concern, but establish clear parameters. Second, provide general reassurance without specific details. You might say, I have systems in place that work for me, rather than justifying each financial choice. She continues with emphasis. Third, consider the difference between assistance and interference. If you genuinely want help with technology or paperwork, accept it gratefully. But if someone's trying to direct your financial decisions or access your accounts without invitation, that's interference that deserves rejection. Robert nods appreciatively. The dignity of risk. We have the right to make our own choices, even financial ones that others might question. Well said, Linda concludes, returning to her seat with the same precision that marks her approach to finances. Our money represents decades of work and sacrifice. How we manage it remains our choice, regardless of our age. As Linda sits, Nancy rises again and approaches the poster. Her teacher's instinct for keeping discussions on track is evident as she points to the 6th item on her list, reject guilt trips about how you spend your time. This one, Nancy begins with a gentle smile, hits close to home for many of us who spent our lives caring for others, as parents, teachers, nurses, community volunteers. She glances meaningfully at Susan, who nods in recognition. After I retired from teaching, Nancy continues, I was excited about finally having time to write poetry, travel, and simply enjoy unscheduled days. But within weeks, it seemed everyone had ideas about how I should fill my suddenly empty time. David chuckles knowingly. Let me guess, volunteer opportunities. So many volunteer opportunities, Nancy confirms with a rueful laugh. The school wanted me to tutor just a few hours a week. My church needed help with their food bank. The community theater thought I'd be perfect for their fundraising committee. She moves toward the window, gazing out briefly before turning back to the group. Each request came wrapped in flattery. "You're so good with children. You're so organized. No one does it better than you." And each one came with an implied guilt trip if I declined. "The children really need you. We're desperate for help." "What else are you doing with your time?" Robert interjects softly, as if retirement is about filling every moment with service to others. "Exactly," Nancy agrees, warming to her topic. "After 30 years of giving to my students, I finally had time to give to myself, but I found it almost impossible to say no to these requests. The result? 6 months into retirement, I was working 20 volunteer hours weekly, feeling exhausted, and watching my personal goals slip away again." Susan leans forward, concerned. "What changed for you?" Nancy's expression softens with remembered insight. "I had a conversation with my oldest friend, Ruth, who retired 3 years before me. She asked what had happened to my poetry. When I explained I hadn't found time yet, she said something I'll never forget. 'If you don't claim this time now, when will you?' She continues with growing conviction. That question resonated deeply. I realized I was treating retirement as an extension of my working life, prioritizing others' needs over my own dreams. I'd internalized the message that my time was only valuable when given to others." Linda nods in understanding. "Society often reinforces that, especially for women. Taking time for ourselves feels selfish." "But it isn't," Nancy counters firmly. "Having boundaries around your time isn't selfish. It's necessary." I began evaluating requests by asking, would accepting this prevent me from pursuing something important to my own growth and fulfillment? If the answer was yes, I learned to decline graciously. She addresses the group earnestly. The most effective response I found was, "That sounds worthwhile, but it doesn't fit my current commitments." Notice what this does. It acknowledges the value of their request while asserting that you already have commitments, even if those commitments are to yourself. David smiles appreciatively. "That's diplomatic but firm." "It needed to be," Nancy admits. "Now I volunteer 6 hours weekly, an amount that feels meaningful without overwhelming. The rest of my time belongs to me, my family by choice, and my long-deferred dreams." She scans the faces of her friends. "If you're struggling with guilt trips about your time, remember this. Retirement isn't an extended community service project unless you want it to be. You've earned these years, fill them intentionally with what brings you joy and meaning. Do you want more advice like this? Hit subscribe and let's optimize your best years together." Continuing, Robert nods slowly, understanding etched in the lines of his face. That's the permission many of us need to hear. As Nancy returns to her seat, Robert rises again to address the 7th item on the list. Reject pressure to date or not date after loss. His kind eyes reflect both pain and hard-won wisdom as he clears his throat. "This is perhaps the most personal boundary I've had to establish," Robert begins, his voice softer than before. "When Elaine died after 46 years of marriage, I felt like half of myself was gone. Grief doesn't follow a timetable or respond to others' expectations, something I had to learn and then teach those around me." The room grows quieter, each person recognizing the weight of this topic. Robert continues, his words measured. "During that first year, well-meaning friends would say, 'You need to get out more,' or 'Elaine wouldn't want you to be alone.' Family members would attempt to set me up with widowed neighbors or church friends, convinced that companionship would accelerate my healing." Nancy interjects gently, as if grief could be rushed. "Exactly," Robert agrees. "I wasn't ready. Those attempts felt like pressure to move on before I'd fully processed my loss. They also implied that my solitude was somehow problematic, something to be fixed rather than respected. He moved slowly across the front of the room, his hands clasped behind his back. The irony came 2 years later, when I did feel ready to consider companionship again. I met Margaret at a community concert, a widow herself who understood grief's journey. When I mentioned her to my children, their reactions surprised me. Suddenly, the same people who had pushed me to get out there seemed uncomfortable with the reality of my doing so. Linda raises an eyebrow. What changed? I think Robert reflects. The idea of me dating was different from the reality. My daughter worried about Margaret's intentions. My son questioned whether it was too soon. Friends made jokes about robbing the cradle because Margaret is 5 years younger. His expression reveals both hurt and resolve. The message was clear. My romantic life was subject to others' approval. David asks thoughtfully, how did you handle these contradictory pressures? Robert's posture straightens with quiet dignity. I realized I needed to reclaim this deeply personal aspect of my life. I told my family, I understand this adjustment is difficult for everyone. Elaine will always be your mother and my first love, but my decision to seek companionship belongs to me alone. I need you to respect my timeline, whether that means waiting until I'm ready or accepting when I am. Susan nods approvingly. That's beautifully expressed. It wasn't easy, Robert admits. There were difficult conversations, tears on both sides, but gradually they began to see that my choices weren't a reflection on their mother's memory or their opinions. They were part of my continued growth as a person still very much alive. He addresses the group with growing confidence. If you're facing similar pressures, either to date before you're ready or to avoid dating to make others comfortable, remember that your heart knows its own timing. There's no correct path through loss. Some never seek another relationship and find fulfillment in other connections. Others find unexpected joy in new companionship. Neither choice diminishes what came before. Nancy adds softly, and both deserve respect from those who love us. Precisely, Robert agrees. The key is recognizing that others' discomfort with your choices often reflects their own unprocessed emotions, their grief, their fear of change, their anxiety about family dynamics. Acknowledging their feelings while maintaining your boundaries can help everyone navigate this sensitive terrain. He returns to his seat with a gentle conclusion. Ultimately, this rejection isn't about pushing others away. It's about claiming ownership of your heart's journey, whether that means solitude or new connection. That choice belongs to you alone. As Robert sits, Susan rises again with her characteristic energy. She approaches the poster and points to the 8th item. Reject limiting new experiences based on age. This one, Susan begins, her eyes bright, with conviction, speaks to the heart of how we see ourselves as we age. Are we still growing, still curious, still open to discovery? Or have we accepted society's message that adventure and learning belong primarily to the young? She moves with animated steps before the group. 6 months ago, I enrolled in salsa dancing lessons at the community college. I'd always loved Latin music, but never had the courage to try dancing myself. The first class was terrifying. I was easily 20 years older than anyone else in the room. Linda smiles encouragingly. That takes real courage. It wasn't just courage, Susan admits. It was also stubbornness. Because when I mentioned the class to my brother, he actually laughed. He asked if I was too old to be making a fool of myself. He suggested bridge lessons instead, something more age-appropriate. David shakes his head in disapproval. As if there's an expiration date on joy. Exactly, Susan exclaims, her hands gesturing emphatically. His comment stuck with me, making me question my choice. But then I realized something important. I'm too old not to try things that bring me joy, regardless of how I might look doing them. She continues with growing passion. Think about it. At 20, I worried constantly about appearing foolish. At 40, I worried somewhat less. Now at 63, why am I still giving power to that fear? I have fewer years ahead than behind. I don't want to waste them avoiding experiences that call to my spirit. Nancy nods thoughtfully. There's a freedom in that perspective. Tremendous freedom, Susan agrees. Once I rejected my brother's limitation and my own internalized ageism, the salsa class became a highlight of my week. Yes, I'm still the oldest student. Yes, I sometimes struggle with the faster combinations, but I'm dancing, actually dancing with genuine joy. She addresses the group earnestly. When we allow others to define what's appropriate for our age, we accept a progressive narrowing of our lives. Travel becomes too strenuous. New skills seem too difficult to acquire. Physical activities appear too risky. Before long, our world has contracted to what others deem suitable for people our age. Robert interjects thoughtfully, "How did you respond to your brother's comment?" Susan smiles, remembering. "I told him, I may be from a different generation than my classmates, but I'm still living in this one, and I choose to live it fully. I'd rather look foolish pursuing joy than look appropriate in boredom." She glances around the circle. If someone in your life is limiting your experiences based on your age, remember this. Research consistently shows that continuing to learn and try new things contributes significantly to cognitive health and emotional well-being as we age. Your inappropriate adventures aren't just fun, they're good for you, Linda adds pragmatically, and often the limitations others place on us reflect their own discomfort with aging, not any actual restriction we face. Absolutely, Susan agrees. When we reject these limitations, we not only free ourselves, we challenge restrictive perceptions of aging for everyone. Each time we step outside those artificial boundaries, we help redefine what aging can look like. She returns to her seat with a final thought. Age brings wisdom, but only if we continue to gather new experiences. Reject any voice, including your own, that tells you it's too late to learn, to grow, to discover. It never is. As Susan sits, David rises again, tall and thoughtful. He approaches the poster and indicates the 9th and final item. Reject the notion that your opinions are outdated. This last rejection, David begins, his carpenter's hands gesturing for emphasis, addresses something many of us have experienced. The dismissal of our perspectives simply because we've lived longer than others in the room. He positions himself before the group, his posture reflecting the dignity he's describing. I've noticed this particularly at family gatherings. A discussion about politics or technology or social change begins, and I offer a perspective. Suddenly, there's that look exchanged between my nieces and nephews, that Uncle David is from another era look, followed by polite nods and a swift change of subject. Nancy sighs in recognition. That dismissal feels like erasure, doesn't it? It does, David agrees, his deep voice carrying controlled emotion. It's as if our accumulated wisdom has an expiration date, as if living through decades of social change somehow makes us less capable of understanding the present moment, rather than more informed about it. Robert nods emphatically. I've experienced this too. My granddaughter once actually patted my hand and said, "Things are different now, Grandpa," when I expressed concern about a decision she was making, as if age had rendered me incapable of understanding contemporary challenges. Exactly, David continues. What's most frustrating is that this dismissal prevents genuine dialogue across generations. When younger family members automatically categorize our perspectives as outdated, they miss the value of experience, and we miss the opportunity to understand their reality. Linda interjects thoughtfully, "How do you address this without sounding defensive?" David smiles slightly. "I've learned to be direct, but not confrontational. When I sense my opinion being dismissed due to my age, I might say, I understand things have changed, and I'm genuinely interested in your perspective. But experience doesn't make my views less valid. It gives them a different context that might be valuable to consider, he continues with growing conviction. I've also found it effective to ask questions that highlight the continuity between generations rather than the differences. Instead of insisting my approach is correct, I might ask, how do you think today's challenges compare to what we faced in the 70s? This opens conversation rather than closing it. Susan adds enthusiastically, I've found that sharing stories rather than opinions sometimes works better. When I describe living through historical events rather than just stating conclusions drawn from them, younger people seem more receptive. That's an excellent approach, David agrees. Narrative creates connection in a way that declarations often don't, and it helps others see that our opinions aren't abstract. They're grounded in lived experience. He addresses the group with quiet intensity. The key is refusing to internalize the message that our perspectives have diminished value. We can be open to new information, willing to evolve our thinking, and still confident that our accumulated wisdom matters. Those aren't contradictory positions, Nancy nods thoughtfully. It's about mutual respect across generations, isn't it? Not assuming either has a monopoly on insight. Precisely, David confirms. When we reject the notion that our opinions are outdated simply because of our age, we're not claiming to have all the answers. We're simply asserting our right to remain active participants in important conversations about our families, our communities, and our world. He returns to his seat with a concluding thought. Age brings perspective that can only be earned through living. That perspective deserves a place at the table alongside younger viewpoints. Together, they create a more complete picture than either could provide alone. As David sits, Linda rises unexpectedly. Though not assigned a specific point on Nancy's list, her financial precision now extends to emotional wisdom as she addresses the group. I've been listening to each of these rejections, Linda begins, her voice clear and measured, and I've noticed something important that ties them all together. Each of these boundaries we're discussing, they're not about pushing people away, they're about teaching them how to be close to us on terms that honor our autonomy. The group's attention focuses on Linda, sensing the importance of her observation. This key, she continues, is delivering these rejections with love. It's possible to be both firm and kind, to establish clear boundaries while maintaining connection. In fact, I'd argue that genuine connection is only possible when healthy boundaries exist. Nancy nods in agreement. That's a crucial distinction. Think about it, Linda elaborates. When we reject unsolicited health advice, we're not rejecting concern, we're channeling it more constructively. When we reject technological supervision, we're not rejecting safety measures. We're ensuring they don't undermine our dignity. Each rejection, properly expressed, actually strengthens relationships rather than damaging them. Robert adds thoughtfully, it's teaching others how to respect us. Exactly, Linda agrees, her normally reserved manner warming. These boundaries aren't walls, they're more like doorways, Nancy completes Linda's thought, placing a gentle hand on the poster. These boundaries aren't walls, they're doorways that allow genuine connection rather than obligation. A contemplative silence falls over the room as each person reflects on the powerful list they've created together. It's David who finally breaks the silence, his expression thoughtful. You know, he says, leaning forward in his chair, I think we've touched on something that could help others beyond our circle. There must be so many people our age struggling with these same boundaries. Susan's eyes light up with her characteristic enthusiasm. What if we turned these discussions into a workshop series? Each of us could present one of the points to a broader audience. A chance to share what we've learned, Robert nods, warming to the idea. To help others find their voice. Nancy smiles, surveying the faces of friends who have become something far more meaningful over their months together. I think that's perfect. After all, wisdom is only valuable when shared. The scene shifts to 6 months later. The East Room of the Pinewood Community Center is now filled to capacity. 30 seniors seated where once there were only 5. Nancy's original poster, now professionally printed and framed, hangs on the wall behind her as she addresses the group. "Welcome," she says with quiet confidence, scanning the attentive faces before her. "Today we're going to talk about something important, the strength it takes to say no to people you love, and how that no might be the most honest yes to yourself you've ever spoken." As the camera pulls back from this scene, we return to address you directly. The courage to establish boundaries doesn't come easily, especially with those we hold dear. The fear of disappointing others, of appearing selfish, or of damaging relationships can keep us silent when we should speak up. But as our friends at Pinewood discovered, the alternative, surrendering your autonomy to keep others comfortable, exacts a far greater cost. Think about your own life for a moment. Where have you allowed boundaries to blur or disappear entirely? Which of the 9 rejections we've explored resonates most deeply with your experience? Perhaps it's unsolicited health advice that undermines your confidence. Maybe it's technological supervision that diminishes your independence. Or possibly it's the subtle pressure to make your time, home, finances, or heart available on others' terms rather than your own. Now ask yourself, what would change if you reclaimed your right to say no? How might your relationships deepen when built on genuine choice rather than obligation? What dreams might you pursue with the energy freed from unnecessary compliance? The beautiful paradox of boundaries is that they don't diminish connection, they enhance it. When you can honestly say no to what doesn't serve you, your yes becomes infinitely more meaningful. The time you spend with loved ones becomes a gift freely given, rather than a duty reluctantly fulfilled. Starting today, how will you begin establishing these essential boundaries? Perhaps you'll practice a simple phrase. "I appreciate your concern, but this decision is mine to make." Maybe you'll schedule a thoughtful conversation with family members about your needs and expectations. Or perhaps you'll simply pause before automatically agreeing to requests, asking yourself, is this my choice or am I responding to subtle pressure? Remember, setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's an act of self-respect that ultimately benefits everyone involved. It models healthy relationship dynamics for younger generations. It prevents the resentment that erodes connection. And most importantly, it honors the wisdom you've earned through decades of living. As the Stoics taught us centuries ago, we cannot control others' reactions to our boundaries, but we can control our own commitment to living authentically. Choosing what to accept and what to reject, we define not just our daily experience, but the legacy we leave, one of dignity, courage, and self-determination. The next chapter of your life is waiting to be written. Will you author it according to others' expectations, or will you claim the pen and write it your way? The choice, as always, is yours to make. What's one lesson this story reminded you of? I'd love to read about it in the comments. Now, tell me, what's one thing you'll do differently after watching this video? Please share with us. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.